They say the West was built by men with guns and gold, but some of its greatest secrets were kept by those who stood in plain sight, yet remained invisible. In the winter of 1881, at a Wyoming train depot where temperatures dropped to 20 below, a young woman swept floors for pennies a day. "Faster, girl. Those Eastern investors arrive tomorrow." I won't have them seeing filth. But what no one knew, what no one bothered to notice, was that beneath her oversized coat, she carried a secret that would change the course of one man's life forever. What happens when a black rancher, a man who knows what it means to be treated as less than human, discovers the truth about the depot's quiet sweeper girl? Stay until the end to witness a story of courage so profound, of sacrifice so devastating, that history itself tried to bury it beneath the snow of that brutal Wyoming winter. Before we journey deeper into this powerful story, I need you to do something important right now. Hit that subscribe button and notification bell. Why? Because here at The Black Rancher, we're uncovering the untold stories of black heroes who helped shape the American frontier, stories deliberately erased from our history books. If you believe everyone deserves to see themselves in America's great narrative, share this video now. These forgotten tales of courage, dignity, and sacrifice deserve to be told. Subscribe now, and let's preserve this legacy together. Now let's journey back to 1881, to a small Wyoming railroad town where our story begins. Iron River, Wyoming Territory, December 1881. Isaiah Monroe pulled his coat tighter against the bitter wind as he stepped from the train. After 3 grueling weeks driving cattle to Cheyenne, all he wanted was to reach his ranch before nightfall. But the connecting train to Wheatland wouldn't arrive until morning. "Just my luck," he muttered, scanning the near-empty platform of Iron River's depot. At 34, Isaiah had built what many considered impossible: the Crescent Ridge Ranch, 2,000 acres of prime grazing land that he'd purchased with money saved from a decade of back-breaking work. Born into slavery in Georgia, he'd headed west after the war, determined to own land that no man could take from him. Now he had 28 head of prime Hereford cattle, 2 reliable ranch hands, and a reputation for breeding the healthiest stock in the territory. But respect came harder than success. Even after 15 years in Wyoming, he still felt eyes following him, judging him. Like now. The depot manager, a red-faced man with a waxed mustache, watched Isaiah from the ticket window with undisguised suspicion. When Isaiah approached to inquire about accommodations, the man's lip curled. "Ain't no colored hotel in Iron River," he said. "You can sleep in the waiting room if you don't cause trouble." Isaiah nodded, swallowing the familiar bitterness. He'd slept in worse places. "Much obliged," he said, his voice neutral. 15 years had taught him when to fight and when to wait. This wasn't worth the battle. As he turned away, something caught his eye. A young woman, little more than a girl, really, sweeping the far end of the platform. She wore a coat several sizes too large, its hem dragging along the wooden planks. Her head was down, face hidden beneath a frayed wool scarf. "You missed a spot, Mary," the depot manager shouted. "Eastern investors coming tomorrow. I want this place spotless, you hear?" The girl, Mary, didn't respond except to sweep more vigorously, her movements stiff in the frigid air. Isaiah set his bags down in the waiting room, then stepped back onto the platform. The temperature was dropping fast as night approached. He watched as the girl struggled to empty a heavy dustbin, her oversized coat making the task awkward. "Need a hand with that?" he offered, approaching slowly so as not to startle her. She flinched anyway, backing away several steps. Her eyes, the only part of her face visible between her scarf and a worn hat, widened in alarm. "I'm just offering help," Isaiah said, keeping his voice gentle. "That looks heavy." For a moment, she seemed frozen in place. Then came a sound, faint but unmistakable, from beneath her coat, a tiny, muffled whimper. The girl's eyes darted frantically to the ticket window, then back to Isaiah. Her arms tightened protectively around her middle, but the movement only prompted another, slightly louder cry. Isaiah knew that sound. He'd helped deliver enough calves on his ranch to recognize it instantly. A baby. The realization hit him like a physical blow. This girl was working in below-freezing temperatures, with an infant strapped to her chest, hidden beneath her coat. "It's all right," he said, lowering his voice further. "I won't say anything." Mary's eyes filled with tears. "Please," she whispered. "If Mr. Hargrove finds out, he'll turn us both out. There's nowhere else to go." Before Isaiah could respond, the depot manager's voice rang out across the platform. "Mary, who told you to stop working? Those steps need sweeping before you're done." "I need to go," she whispered. "Please, sir, please don't tell." Isaiah nodded once, watching as she hurried away, one hand supporting the hidden bundle beneath her coat. His mind was already working, calculating. The night would bring temperatures well below zero. The waiting room had a stove, but it wouldn't be enough for a newborn. As he retrieved his bags, a plan began to form. Some battles weren't worth fighting, but some weren't optional at all. Isaiah couldn't sleep. The wooden bench in the waiting room was hard and cold, but that wasn't what kept him awake. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the girl's face, her fear, her desperation. He'd seen that look before. On his mother's face, when the overseer would inspect the slave quarters. On his own reflection during those first uncertain years of freedom. It was the look of someone expecting the world to deliver another blow. Around midnight, the depot fell silent. The manager had retreated to his adjacent quarters after stoking the waiting room stove one final time with barely enough coal to last the night. Isaiah waited another hour, listening to the wind howl outside, before rising quietly. He found her where he expected, in the storage room behind the ticket office, a threadbare blanket on the floor, a small bundle of belongings, and Mary, curled protectively around the infant, both shivering despite being wrapped in every piece of clothing she seemed to own. "Miss," he whispered. She startled awake, eyes wide with terror. "It's just me, from earlier," he said, keeping his distance. "I brought something for the little one." Slowly he set down a small bundle, his spare shirt wrapped around his canteen of warm coffee. "Put this next to the baby," he explained. "It'll hold heat for a while." Mary stared at him, then at the offering. Cautiously, she reached for it. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Because it's 20 below out there, and that child deserves a chance." As she tucked the warm bundle next to the infant, Isaiah caught his first glimpse of the baby, impossibly small, with a tuft of dark hair. No more than a few weeks old. "Thank you," Mary whispered, some of the wariness leaving her eyes. "What's your plan?" Isaiah asked. "You can't keep hiding the child here forever." Her shoulders slumped. "I don't know. I lost my position at the boarding house when—" She trailed off, gesturing to the baby. "Mr. Hargrove lets me sleep here if I work from dawn till dusk. When spring comes, maybe I can find passage further west. And until then?" She looked away. "We survive. One day at a time." Isaiah considered his next words carefully. "I have a ranch, 20 miles south of Wheatland. It's not much, but there's a cabin. Room for help if I had any." Mary's eyes narrowed with sudden suspicion. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I need a housekeeper. Someone to cook meals, tend the garden come spring. The cabin has its own stove. It would be warm for the child." "And what would you expect in return?" The question carried all her fear and distrust of a world that had clearly shown her its cruelest side. Isaiah straightened, offended despite himself. "I expect honest work, nothing more. I've got 2 hands working my ranch already. Brothers from Texas. You'd have your privacy. The baby could grow up with fresh air, good food." "Why would you do this?" Isaiah was silent for a long moment. "Because I know what it means to have no choices," he finally said. "My train leaves at 9 tomorrow. If you want to come, be on it." He turned to leave, then stopped. "What's the child's name?" Mary looked down at the sleeping infant. For the first time, a hint of a smile touched her lips. "Hope," she whispered. "Her name is Hope." I know you're completely captivated by Mary and Isaiah's story right now, that moment of connection between 2 souls society has cast aside. But I need to interrupt for just a moment to remind you why the Black Rancher channel exists. These stories of courage, of human dignity in the face of impossible odds, they've been systematically erased from our history books. The contributions of Black Americans to building the West have been deliberately forgotten. If you believe these stories deserve to be told, please subscribe to our channel right now. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story. And if you're already a subscriber, take a moment to share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Now let's return to Isaiah as he boards the morning train, uncertain if Mary and her child will choose to trust him. The platform was crowded the next morning. Men in expensive coats with gold watch chains, the Eastern investors, Isaiah presumed, descended from the incoming train while the depot manager fawned over them. No one paid any attention to the black rancher waiting quietly to board for Wheatland. Isaiah checked his pocket watch. 8:55. The conductor called for final boarding. She wasn't coming. He felt a curious disappointment as he gathered his bags. He'd offered what he could. He couldn't force her to accept help. "All aboard!" the conductor shouted. Isaiah stepped toward the train, then froze. There, at the edge of the platform, stood Mary. She'd abandoned her oversized coat, revealing the truth for all to see, a tiny infant strapped to her chest in a makeshift sling. In one hand, she clutched a small bundle containing what must have been all her worldly possessions. Their eyes met across the platform. Isaiah could see her fear, her uncertainty. But there was something else there too, a steely determination. He nodded once, extending his hand in invitation. For a long, suspended moment, he thought she might turn away. Then, clutching her baby tighter, she walked toward him. "Last chance to change your mind," Isaiah said quietly as she reached him. Mary looked down at her daughter, then back at Isaiah. "There's nothing for us here." As they boarded together, Isaiah felt the stares of the other passengers. A black man traveling with a white woman and infant. It was enough to raise eyebrows even in the relatively progressive Wyoming territory. "Ticket?" the conductor asked, his gaze traveling suspiciously between them. Isaiah handed over 2 tickets. "You're traveling together?" The question carried clear disapproval. "Yes," Isaiah said simply. "My new housekeeper and her child." The conductor hesitated, then reluctantly punched both tickets and moved on, muttering under his breath. They found seats at the rear of the car, Isaiah taking the aisle to shield Mary and the baby from curious stares. As the train lurched into motion, he noticed Mary's hands trembling. "You can still change your mind at Wheatland," he said. "There's a women's aid society there if you'd rather." Mary shook her head. "I made my choice." After a pause, she added, "But there are things you should know about me, about Hope. You don't owe me any explanations." "I do if you're offering us shelter." She took a deep breath. "My name isn't Mary. It's Margaret. Margaret Calloway." Isaiah nodded, waiting. "I was a governess for a family in Cheyenne. The father, he—" Her voice faltered, then strengthened with resolve. "When I told him about the baby, he gave me $50 to disappear, said his wife would never believe it wasn't mine." Isaiah's jaw tightened, but he kept his expression neutral. "The child?" Margaret looked down at the sleeping infant. "She's mine. In every way that matters now. That's all I need to know. What will you tell people? Your neighbors? They'll talk." Isaiah allowed himself a bitter smile. "Miss Calloway, I'm a black man who owns 2,000 acres in Wyoming territory. People have been talking about me since the day I arrived." For the first time, Margaret's face relaxed into something close to a genuine smile. "I suppose that's true. My ranch hands, the brothers I mentioned, they're good men. They won't ask questions that aren't their business." As the train rocked gently along the tracks, Isaiah watched the tension gradually leave Margaret's shoulders. The baby awakened and began to fuss. Without hesitation, Margaret opened her blouse enough to nurse the child, using a small blanket for modest coverage. "Hope," Isaiah said softly, testing the name. "It's a good name." "It was my mother's," Margaret replied, stroking the infant's cheek. "She always said hope is the last thing to die." They fell into comfortable silence as the train carried them south, away from Iron River, toward Wheatland and beyond, to Crescent Ridge Ranch, where a cabin stood empty, waiting. In that quiet moment, Watching Margaret whisper to her child, Isaiah realized something important. He'd spent 15 years building a ranch, but perhaps what he'd really been building was a sanctuary, a place where the persecuted could find safety, a place where hope could take root and grow. Wheatland Station was little more than a platform with a small shelter, but to Isaiah it represented the boundary between the outside world and his own hard-won territory. He helped Margaret down from the train, conscious of the curious glances from other passengers. "My wagon's at the livery," he explained, shouldering both his bags and her small bundle. "It's about an hour's ride to the ranch from here." Margaret nodded, adjusting Hope's sling. The infant, having been fed and changed on the train, slept peacefully against her mother's chest. The town was busy that afternoon. Merchants called to one another, cowboys lounged outside the saloon, and women in practical frontier dress moved purposefully between shops. Isaiah led Margaret down the main street, aware of the stares following them but choosing to ignore them. At the livery stable, the owner, a grizzled man named Jenkins, looked up from shoeing a horse. "Monroe," he acknowledged with a nod. Then his gaze shifted to Margaret and the baby. His eyebrows rose, but to his credit he asked no questions. "Your wagon's ready. Thompson brought those supplies you ordered." "Much obliged," Isaiah replied, handing over payment for the wagon's care. As they loaded their few belongings, Isaiah noticed Margaret's wary glance at a group of men watching them from across the street. "Word travels fast in small towns," he said quietly. "Best to get used to it." "Will it cause trouble for you?" she asked. "Taking us in?" Isaiah considered this as he helped her onto the wagon seat. "Probably," he admitted, "but trouble finds me whether I look for it or not. At least this time it's for something worthwhile." The drive to Crescent Ridge took them through rolling grasslands, golden in the winter sun. Despite the cold, the day was clear, offering views all the way to the distant mountains. "It's beautiful," Margaret said, breaking a long silence. "I've never seen so much open space." "That's why I came west," Isaiah replied. "Room to breathe." As they crested a final hill, Isaiah slowed the wagon. "There," he said, pointing toward a cluster of buildings nestled in a protected valley. "That's Crescent Ridge." The ranch wasn't grand by any measure, but it spoke of solid work and careful planning. A main house built of hewn logs, a large barn, corrals, and two smaller cabins stood in neat arrangement. Smoke rose from the chimney of one of the smaller cabins. "The Jackson brothers live there," Isaiah explained, gesturing to the occupied cabin. "Elijah and Samuel. They handle the cattle mostly. That other cabin," he pointed to a structure standing slightly apart from the others, "that would be yours if you want it." Margaret stared at the cabin, sturdy, with a small porch, and what appeared to be a garden plot, now dormant for winter. "It has 2 rooms," Isaiah continued. "A stove, table, bed. It's simple, but it's solid. Keeps the wind out." As they approached the ranch, 2 men emerged from the barn. The Jackson brothers were tall, muscular men with the weathered look of those who worked outdoors in all conditions. They watched the wagon approach with obvious curiosity. "Didn't expect you back with company, boss," the older one, Elijah, called as Isaiah brought the wagon to a stop. "Miss Calloway," Isaiah said formally, "this is Elijah and Samuel Jackson. Best ranch hands in the territory, though don't tell them I said so." The brothers tipped their hats, eyeing Margaret and the baby with undisguised surprise. "Miss Calloway will be taking over the housekeeping," Isaiah explained, his tone making it clear that further questions weren't welcome. "She and her daughter will be living in the north cabin." To the brothers' credit, they accepted this with no more than a shared glance. "That cabin's been closed up all winter," Samuel said. "Let me get a fire started before you move in, ma'am. It'll be cold as a grave in there." Margaret nodded gratefully. "Thank you." "I'll show you the main house while Samuel takes care of that," Isaiah offered. "You must be hungry after the journey." As they walked toward the main house, Margaret suddenly stopped, looking out across the ranch, at the cattle in the distance, the mountains beyond, the vast open sky. "What is it?" Isaiah asked. "Yesterday morning I was sweeping a train platform, hiding my baby, terrified of being discovered," she said, her voice soft with wonder. "And now you're here," Isaiah finished simply. Why? She asked, turning to him. Why would you do this for strangers? Isaiah looked out at his land, at everything he'd built from nothing. Then he looked at Margaret and Hope. Because 15 years ago I arrived in Wyoming territory with nothing but the clothes on my back and a dream of owning land, he said, and an old Cheyenne woman named Grace found me half frozen in a ditch. She took me in, fed me, gave me work when no one else would, said everyone deserves one chance to start again. He met Margaret's eyes. This is yours. The weeks passed slowly as winter tightened its grip on Crescent Ridge. Margaret and Hope settled into the north cabin, which transformed rapidly under her care. Isaiah provided fabric, and Margaret sewed curtains for the windows. Samuel Jackson built a cradle for Hope, carved with delicate flowers. By unspoken agreement, no one asked about Hope's father or Margaret's past. On the frontier, what mattered was a person's willingness to work, to contribute, to help the community survive. And Margaret proved herself essential almost immediately. The first time Isaiah entered his house after Margaret had been cooking there, he stopped in the doorway, momentarily stunned by the aromas filling the air. Is something wrong? Margaret asked, looking up from the pot she was stirring. No, he said, removing his hat. It's just been a long time since this place smelled like anything but coffee and bacon. She smiled at that, a real smile that reached her eyes. Sit, she said. It's nearly ready. That night, Isaiah, the Jackson brothers, Margaret and little Hope shared the first of many meals together. As Isaiah watched Margaret feed Hope a small spoonful of broth, he felt something shift in the atmosphere of his home. For 15 years, he'd built Crescent Ridge with single-minded determination, focused only on making the land produce, on proving that a former slave could succeed where others had failed. But a ranch wasn't just land and cattle. A home wasn't just walls and a roof. As winter gradually yielded to spring, news of Margaret and Hope's presence at Crescent Ridge spread through the surrounding community. Some neighbors stopped visiting. Others came specifically to satisfy their curiosity, thinly disguised as welcome calls. Isaiah had expected this. What he hadn't expected was Margaret's quiet dignity in the face of it all. When Mrs. Patterson from the neighboring ranch made pointed comments about the unusual arrangements at Crescent Ridge, Margaret simply replied, Mr. Monroe has been kind enough to offer honest work to a woman in need. I fail to see what's unusual about Christian charity. By the time the first crocuses pushed through the melting snow, Hope was sitting up, reaching for everything within grasp. Her favorite target was Isaiah's beard, which never failed to make her giggle with delight. One evening, as Isaiah returned from checking the herd, he found Margaret standing on the porch of her cabin, watching the sunset with Hope in her arms. You've changed things around here, he said, stopping at the bottom step. Margaret looked down at him, her expression thoughtful. For better or worse? For better, he replied without hesitation. The Jackson brothers are eating regular meals. The house is clean. Even the chickens are laying more eggs. She laughed at that, a sound that had become more frequent as the days lengthened. Is that all? She asked, a teasing note in her voice. Isaiah removed his hat, turning it in his hands. No, he admitted. Before you came, this was a ranch. Now it feels like something else. A home? She suggested softly. Yes. He mounted the steps slowly, coming to stand beside her. I didn't realize how lonely it was until it wasn't anymore. Hope reached for him as she always did, little fingers grasping. Without thinking, Isaiah took her from Margaret's arms. The baby immediately grabbed his beard, making them both smile. I've been thinking, Margaret said after a moment, about the future. Isaiah felt a sudden tightness in his chest. You're planning to leave? No, she said quickly, unless you want us to. I don't. Their eyes met in the fading light. So much remained unspoken between them. Her past, his struggles, the obstacles they would face if they dared to build something more permanent. People will talk, Margaret whispered. People already talk, Isaiah countered. Let them. It won't be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is. Hope, oblivious to the weight of the moment, patted Isaiah's cheeks with both hands, demanding attention. He smiled down at her, then looked back at Margaret. "I'm not asking for anything, Margaret. You and Hope have a place here for as long as you want it, but if someday you might consider—" He trailed off, uncharacteristically uncertain. Margaret's hand came to rest lightly on his arm. "I never expected to find safety again," she said. "I never dared hope for more than survival. And now? Now I think about tomorrow, and the day after." Her voice strengthened. "I think about Hope, growing up here, learning to ride, helping with the garden. I think about meals around that table year after year." Isaiah covered her hand with his. "I'd like that. So would I." As the last light faded from the sky, they stood together on the porch, three unlikely souls brought together by chance or fate, or perhaps something more deliberate. A former slave who had built a life from nothing, a woman who had risked everything for a new beginning, a child born of tragedy but given a name that spoke of tomorrow. Behind them, lamps were being lit in the main house. Samuel Jackson was playing his harmonica. The cattle lowed softly in the distance, and all around Crescent Ridge Ranch, spring was awakening, bringing with it the promise of new life. If this story moved you, if you felt the courage of Margaret, the honor of Isaiah, the promise of little hope, I need you to do something important right now. Subscribe to the Black Rancher channel. Hit that notification bell. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that second chances are possible, that family isn't always blood, that hope can be found in the most unexpected places. The stories we tell shape how we see ourselves and our history. For too long, the contributions of Black Americans to building the West have been erased, forgotten, pushed to the margins. Together, we can change that, one story at a time. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Until next time, remember the legacy of men like Isaiah Monroe. Men who stood tall, claimed their place, and built something that would last long after they were gone. The Black Rancher will return with another powerful story next week. Don't miss it.